Hello everybody and welcome to the Robert H. World True Crime Show. We're just going to have a slow start because we're expecting a raid in a minute. So I'll do a little bit of promotion first. I'm pleased to announce that I'm sure if you've been watching, you know I've been publishing these True Crime Dossiers books. The first 3 volumes are on Amazon. I have now published an omnibus of the first 3 volumes. It's a larger sized book, and it is a much more economical price. So if you've got any interest, there's now a much cheaper way to buy it. And I think the plan is I will keep doing the single books and then the omnibuses every 3 books. It's a nice size, I feel. We've got a few things lined up for tonight. We've got 2 catfishing stories. We've got a good story about well, it's a story where I'm going to ask your opinion on what's been going on. I think that's the best thing to do. It's I feel it's quite certain, but we shall see. Now you may notice I've had a bit of a revamp of the screen. Oh, hello Foxy, hello everybody, nice to see you all. So if anybody is not following Foxy, Foxy is a variety streamer. She does games, she does singing. My favourite is her paranormal streams. They're always good fun. But I say they're always good fun. There's a few people that report that they're a bit terrified, which is part of the fun, but you know, viewer discretion advised and all that. Oh, thanks Foxy. Yes, Steve has been helping me get the final tweaks in, and I think we've reached the perfect stage. So yes, there's been a lot of behind the scenes work to improve, and that work will continue obviously as we strive to keep going. But yes, hello Phil. Oh, Phil Smythe. Phil Smythe is a wonderful music streamer. Do give him and Foxy a follow if you're interested. And Steve, I'm sure if you've been in this chat for a while, you know Steve Ford, a very talented classic rock guitarist. He does 4 shows a week. My streaming schedule is organised so I can still watch Steve. I'm not going to lie about that. So if you want to know where I am, Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday, it's watching Steve. Do come along and watch him, he's very talented. And if you're wondering why there's been a sudden leap in the quality of the visuals, that's because Steve's very kindly helped me tweak things to their optimum value. So let me give you a rundown of what we've got in store for tonight, everybody. We've got 2 stories about catfishing, although one of those stories is historical catfishing, which you may not know is a thing, but you will in a minute. We've got we probably will get to a story of the true crime streamer who solved a true crime. I feel like secretly every true crime streamer actually wants to solve a crime, but one guy actually basically did. So we will get to that, and we will also have a story. It's not a pleasant story, but it does give me the opportunity to ask the opinion of chat, because opinions are still divided. So I hope we look forward to that later on. Right, everybody, have I let me just check I've given all the shout outs for everyone in, because I do feel that's important. If you're a streamer, oh yes, Jin's in. Jin is a very talented musician, but she's also one of the most charming cooking streams you will ever see. So do give Jin TV a look. And if you are a streamer, do let me know in chat and we will give you a shout out. Okay. Shall we dive into a bit of crime, because that's what you're all here for, I'm sure. So we're going to start off with the case of Bela Kiss, a catfishing serial killer who was unmasked by World War One. Yeah, I'm doing a historical one, no surprises there, but it is an interesting one. So, there is a popular image of the serial killer. You know, it's an odd, socially awkward individual. Bela Kiss was not this. He was charming. He was handsome by the standards of his day. He was one of the most eligible bachelors in his village. He also killed over 20 people, vanished and was never caught. And this is added to a sort of mystique. It also allows me to discuss the fact that catfishing is not a modern invention. We've just invented a word for it, but this sort of con has been going on for a long time. There is a sort of feeling, I think, amongst people that don't watch true crime, that it's all serial killers. I'm fascinated by con men myself. I find the way they wheedle in and can affect everybody, even people that don't think they can be conned, can be conned. So I find them fascinating. So there's going to be a few of those on this stream. The details of Bela Kiss's earlier life are a bit unclear. He was born around 1877 in a town in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Now, essentially, this is Austria, Hungary, and a load of Central to Eastern Europe, which was all in this very complicated patchwork block. That's not as important to know, so I'm not going to... if anyone wants a history stream on the Austro-Hungarian Empire, you know what to do. Anyway, so from 1900 he lived at 9 Cotha Street in Sincota. This is now part of Budapest. But then was just a town nearby. And he worked as a tinsmith. He married a lady called Maria, but she cheated on him and she disappeared. He said he'd run off with her lover to America. Now, if you were in the last stream I did, somebody else disappeared and somebody said they'd run off with their lover to America. So you pretty much know exactly where this is going already. Right? His neighbours gave him a lot of sympathy, and he was popular. He was a popular man. He was a happy soul. He spent a lot of money on people. He did public parties. Although he had no official schooling, he read widely and could carry on conversations on anything. Everyone was waiting to see who would pick as his next wife, and he was seen in the company of many women from the cities and outside. But they never stayed around for long. Just give me a second, chaps. Sorry about that. So, it's important to stress that he was not seen as a strange figure. He was the hub of the town. The only regular person in his life, though, was his housekeeper, Mrs. Jakubek. Anyway, that might have been it. That might have been the story. But in 1914, Austria-Hungary's Archduke was assassinated and World War I exploded. Although he was technically too old to be in the army, he went off to fight. We don't know whether he volunteered or whether he was conscripted, but off he went. He would never return home. However, during the years before the war kicked off, he had started collecting large metal drums. Many people would ask him what he was doing with these drums. Sometimes he'd say he was hoarding gasoline in case of a war. Now, the history books like to tell you that the World War I kicked off as a complete surprise. This isn't true. It had been on the cards for many years, especially in Austria-Hungary, and many people had been looking to how they would survive a war and hoarding things. So this was not unusual. The fact he had a load of metal drums full of gasoline, that's nobody thought that anything of that. However, he'd been gone for a while. The war was going on. Now, we're not entirely sure how these barrels got opened. One story is that the landlord wanted to try and rent his house out while he wasn't in it, and found the barrels. The other one is the government, desperate for gasoline, knew that he'd got some barrels, so they went to get them. Either way, in 1916, either the landlord or soldiers punched a hole in one of the barrels just to make sure what was in it, and they didn't smell gasoline. They smelled death. Detective Chief Karoli Nagy led a contingent to open the barrels. Mrs. Jakubek, who was still looking after the property, objected. They said, "They're not your property, you mustn't open them." But when they opened the first barrel, they found a woman's body stuffed in it. She had been strangled but preserved in methanol. So they opened the rest and found more bodies, all women except for one man. The man was, of course, the lover of his wife, and one of the bodies was his wife. So there was a body in each barrel, but they kept looking. They found bodies which had been stored in the barrels and had been buried on his land. So the police now tried to make 2 arrests. They immediately arrested Mrs. Jakubek, and they tried to arrest Kiss. Now, Kiss was at the front. In this town, they didn't really know what had happened to him, so they sent out an order that no letters from this area could be delivered to the front to not warn him. And then they sent letters to the military asking for him to be arrested. They then questioned Mrs. Jakubek. She denied knowing anything about the murders and said that Kiss couldn't have done this. She said, I'm a simple old woman, don't send me to prison. That's an actual quote. I know, right, that sounds like somebody later on has made up an offensive, patronising quote. But I'm assured that she did try that as a defence. She then went on to say, he was a good-looking boy. We were so fond of him. He was kind to everyone. He wouldn't hurt a living thing. Once a dog had broken its leg, he made splints and nursed the animals to recovery. I'm sure it is a mistake. Asked, did you see many of these women who visited Bela? She said, I scarcely said a word to them. I was only a servant and spent the nights in my own home. What he did with these ladies was none of my business. They were all city ladies, not peasants like me. And then a final, I am innocent. She also denied knowing she was a major beneficiary of Kiss's will. However, she also told them that there was one room in the house she wasn't allowed to clean or even enter. Obviously, the police went right to it. And this is where the story is revealed. It was an office. There were 2 main collections in this office. One were books and articles on strangulations and poison, showing that Kiss had an interest in murder. The second were hundreds of letters. Starting from 1903, there was correspondence with many, many women. We're going to focus on 74. Many of which who had sent photos to a man called Hoffman, which was Kiss's fake identity. He had been posting adverts as Hoffman, looking for marriage, looking for lonely middle-aged women that he could string along. He'd start a relationship. He'd even visit them. He'd spend money on them, but only to find out if they had either wealth or no close relatives who would miss them. If they had wealth, he pursued and began asking for money. Some sent everything they had to him. If they became suspicious or caused a problem, Kiss invited them to his house and murdered them. All the women were from outside the local area, so he wouldn't get caught. He had been successfully catfishing dozens of them. Now, there's evidence 2 women had tired of his demands and started court proceedings to get the money back. Unfortunately, they had both disappeared during this process, and you pretty much know why. It was later discovered that while Kiss had corresponded with 74 women, he had actually had proposals from well over 100, but for whatever reason, presumably because they were not wealthy, Kiss had not pursued them. They had a lucky escape. He was clever. When these women told their friends about Kiss, they would always be set up to say, "Oh, I'm leaving to marry him. I won't be back." So they weren't. The local friends would assume they'd moved on. For instance, dressmaker Catherine Varga sold her entire business and packed up to move to see Hoffman. She was found in a barrel, sadly. Another woman, Margaret Toth, had a prying mother, so when she visited Kiss, he talked her into writing and signing a letter, which he posted to her mother, telling her she was moving to America. Sadly, she too was then murdered. There was no doubt Kiss had done this, and police identified 24 victims. However, despite a hunt for Kiss, he was never officially seen again. Nobody quite knows what happened to him. Nagy was initially told that Kiss had died in hospital in 1915, but then he'd been told that Kiss was still alive in the hospital. Nagy rushed off to the hospital, which was in Serbia, and when he arrived, there was a corpse stuffed in the bed as if to fake a body. It's now officially this is down as it's unclear if Kiss had done this and fled, or if he was ever there at all. But I think we can all agree there aren't many other reasons to hide a corpse in your bed and then disappear. So I personally feel that was probably Kiss on the run. There then followed years of sightings. Had he realised he'd been found and changed identity? Had he gone elsewhere in the empire, which then broke up after the war, or to Turkey? There was a French foreign legionary on record called Hoffman who bragged about strangling people. And when investigators came to see if it was Kiss, Hoffman vanished. A janitor in New York in the 30s was sighted looking like Hoffman. In 1932, homicide detective Henry Oswald was certain he spotted Kiss exiting the subway on Times Square, but the crowd prevented him from making an arrest. Now, that is the last possible sighting. No one ever knew what had happened to him. He could have died at the front much before his crimes were discovered. He could have been killing for years in another place. There is the possibility that if he had survived and moved, he carried on. No one actually has attributed any suspicious death to him, but then again, how would you connect these two together in that era? So no one really knows how many people Kiss killed. It could have been the people in the drums, but he could have been doing this for years. The lack of information about his early years stops any real assessment of what he was doing. Some people say that his wife saw the affair of his wife caused him to murder, and he kept killing after that. But that's a very misogynistic explanation, blaming somebody for murder. People, there's something in people before that. But again, we're dealing with articles and documentation from the 19-teens and the 1920s mostly. Given that the letters from Catfish Women date from 1903, there was the possibility he'd started before. Thank you for the follow, King Cobra, and thank you for the follow, Westsider. One thing is for sure, Bela Kiss captured the morbid side of the popular imagination. I'm sure we all know how Jack the Ripper has captured the media in the UK and in the West. In fact, remind me to circle back to that in about 2 minutes, because I want to discuss something that has broken in the news in the last 2 weeks. Our mythology grew up around him. He became, in popular folklore, no longer a man who strangled women. He became the vampire of Sincota, a man interested in the occult who drank the blood of his victims. A legend started that there was blood drained from the wounds on the corpses, but again, a legend. The internet has taken a new generation in expanding this. They call him the Hungarian vampire, Hungary's Dracula, all of which has absolutely no relation to the documented truth, which is already terrible enough. We don't really need to turn him into a vampire, but And that is the story of Bela Kiss. Now, I mentioned Jack the Ripper there, as I mentioned a couple of times. I'm working. You're so hungry. Thanks. Yes, Steve. Yes. Keep the puns. I do love puns. I'm awful. I love puns. I will admit it here. So any that come up. I was asked. I mean, I think I mentioned I've been given a cat, and somebody said to me, "Well, you've got to come up with a true crime pun for your cat. You know, a punning name." So I will be taking ongoing suggestions of what we can call Polly the cat. Try try and keep them in good taste, because you know, be terrible to start a career before it's begun. Anyway, speaking of good taste, about 2 weeks ago, a new restaurant. Well, I say restaurant, a new fast food outlet opened in London. For reasons nobody has been able to explain, in London there is now a baked potato shop themed around Jack the Ripper. There is giant inflatable Jack the Ripper outside. This has not gone down well with a lot of people. Perhaps you can understand why. I've not been, but I have seen substantial photos from the inside. They have a bed attached to the ceiling with roses for all of the victims and a black rose for Jack the Ripper. Again, I don't know why, but I'm not sure. I mean, if you were going to set up a Jack the Ripper themed place, even if you were going to do a food themed Jack the Ripper place, I'm not sure why Spudger-like was not acceptable. But you know, I will. If you remind me in Discord, I will put photos in the Discord of this ongoing event. I mean, quite rightly, the people that live in the area of Jack the Ripper nowadays are very I was going to use the word touchy, but I feel that's judgy. They're very aware of what happened, and they don't really like people. Where else are we going to get a Ripper burger? Yes, King. The thing, yes. I mean, it's a bit weird. The whole thing is very weird, but at least that is slightly more understandable than jacket potatoes. I don't know. Anyway, well, we'll put that in the Discord. They're not my. I should point out they're not my photos. I'm in a Jack the Ripper discussion group, and somebody braved it. Very strange. Anyway, so we I've said all that as if you know I've got some level of taste, but I'm now about to tell you a story about a celebrity cannibal, so I don't really feel I've got any moral high ground. And Issei Sagawa certainly doesn't have any moral high ground. Now, chat, I want you to tell me something. So I'm going to tell you a story about a man who 100% definitely killed and ate someone. What do you think happened to him? We'll wait and see if anyone braves an answer. I know there's an interesting delay. I've noticed there is a delay. So when you hear me say something and I pause for a while, that is because there was a delay between the stream going out and answers coming in. So Tegan says he put on weight. Okay, yeah. I get it. I bet none of you are going to say he became a massive celebrity that made his own movies, made his own manga, and appeared on his own restaurant review page. But this is completely true. And I am now going to tell you the 100% bizarre story of Issei Sagawa and how a lot of money managed to stop him spending his due lifetime in prison. So, Issei Sagawa was born on April 26, 1949, in Japan to a wealthy family. This is a hugely important point. His grandfather was the editor of one of Japan's big four newspapers. His dad was an industrialist. He himself was born prematurely. He was ill. He had an intestinal disease. He grew up a sickly, small, introverted man who lost himself in books. He lost himself in books more than people normally do, because he said his desire to eat someone first manifested when he was 7, when he saw a male schoolmate's thigh. As he grew older, his cannibalistic desires grew stronger, and they moved towards women. So a lot of pen ink has been spent. A lot of keyboards have been worn out trying to discover where this desire for human flesh came from. A lot has been said it came from a game his family played when he was a child. So I'm going to read out an article from New Criminology, a section of an article from New Criminology in September 2007. There was an uncle, Mitsuo, who at the traditional New Year's festivities often disguised himself as a frightening boy-eating giant. Dressed to look like a monster, he would chase the scurrying children, pretending he wanted to devour them. Little Issei and his elder brother were the recipients of the horrible giant's attention, and it was up to their father, Issei Sagawa, the knight literally in shining armour, to appear as their saviour. The boys whooped and yelled hysterically as the giant, making his hungry giant noises, dashed around in the house. Strangely, each time the game was played, the giant would emerge as the victor, first blinding and slaying the gallant knight. The children would be snatched up and taken away, ready for a giant cooking pot. So you get the idea that this has not gone too well. Right, so for those of you watching on the VOD, chat inadvertently now fancy burgers and probably jacket potatoes. So what I should have done is some deal with Just Eat. So at this point you could get the food in. If you find me with a sponsorship from the Jack the Ripper potato place, you know times have got really hard. Anyway, so for Issei, sexual desire and the need to eat someone became one and the same. To be fair, 15-year-old Sagawa rang a psychiatrist, knowing that if he left this unchecked, he was going to kill someone. He tried to get help, and the expert said he could only be helped if he travelled in person. They would not do anything over the phone. Obviously, this is before the internet. This was too much for a painful introvert with his guilty conscience, so he stopped trying to get help. He tried speaking to his brothers. Some brothers aren't that helpful, and he was laughed at. So basically, Sagawa gave up and decided to lean into wanting to kill someone. He managed to get through his time at Waco University and Gwanzai Gakuin University, and he earned a master's degree in Shakespearean literature. But disaster struck when, aged 24, he acted on his cannibalistic impulses and became fascinated by a German woman. He liked the fact she was European, much taller than him. She was teaching him German. He trailed her back to his flat, broke in through a window, intending to cut flesh off her bum. But he hadn't bought any tools, so as he was searching the house for a knife or something, she woke up and knocked him to the floor. He was captured, arrested. However, the police didn't instantly think, oh, you've come to eat someone. They just charged him with attempted rape. This would have been a chance to stop him. This chance was missed because his family paid off the victim, and Sagawa was allowed to carry on as he was. He confessed to a psychiatrist again, but this too was smoothed over by the family. There were no other major incidents until Sagawa moved to the Sorbonne in France to study for a PhD. Now, there's a video interview with Vice, which is on YouTube. I've got quite a few quotes from it. If you are interested in this story, you can actually go and see him talking. Of all the media he is involved in, which we'll come to later, this is probably the only one you can watch without a sense of that you probably shouldn't be. These are just normal interviews. We'll get on to the other things he did later. Trust me, that it all gets a bit odd. Anyway, he narrates how when he left for his trip to Paris, I was at the gate with my passport in hand. My mother had an extremely sad look on her face, as if she knew something terrible was going to happen. Her motherly instincts filled her with apprehension. Again, the family refused to stop him. In fact, they only allowed him to continue. By now he was 27, and he was obsessed with the idea of killing and eating someone. He was in France. He confessed he brought prostitutes home almost every night, but found himself unable to shoot the victims. Hello, Tom. Good to see you. You've come in halfway through a story, but you are about to get to the nub of the issue, and the nub is how someone you would not in a million years imagine would ever be let out of prison instead becomes a celebrity. So this freezing would end on June 11th, 1981. By now he was 32. He was still at the Sorbonne, and he became fascinated with classmate René Hartweld. He fell into his form of twisted desire from the first moment they met, and he forced himself to try and overcome his shyness to try and make the bond he needed. Although, again, it's worth pointing out that he needed this bond to kill them. This was not some sort of pleasant attraction. He would talk to classmates to try and impress her. He would play along with jokes instead of being offended. They formed a friendship. They would go to art and literature and concerts or exhibitions. Weirdly, at this point, one of Sagawa's celebrity crushes was in Paris at the same time as him, and they killed themselves. And Sagawa began to fantasize, why wasn't it him that found the body? So this is where we're going. I'll give you a shout out in a bit, Tom. I'll finish it first. So Sagawa saw an opening with Hartweld. She needed money. He asked if he paid for her schooling, would she come and translate poetry for him? He had no intention of paying any attention to the poetry, of course. Sagawa was 4'9". Hartweld was 5'10". He wanted to ingest her beauty and strength. She arrived, but again he couldn't kill her. So he asked her again. She came round, and as she sat reading, he took a rifle from the cupboard and pointed it at her. He pulled the trigger, but the gun jammed, so he put it back in the cupboard. She was unaware. Yet the desire to eat her got bigger and bigger. He began to tell himself, if I don't kill her soon, we'll become real friends and I'll never be able to do it, which is sort of the least helpful definition of friends I've ever heard. Anyway, so he asked around again. This time, could he record her on tape performing the poem? She arrived. They talked. Sagawa asked her if they could become lovers. In the conventional sense, Hartweld said no, they were friends. She performed the poem. This time, snubbed, Sagawa took out the .22 rifle and shot her dead. He later claimed out he passed out at this point from the shock of it all, but he awoke to find a body. Now, we're going to get into about 5 minutes of very gruesome details before we get on to the rest of the case. If anybody doesn't want really gruesome details, this is the moment to leave for a bit. But obviously, I have a feeling, as you know, I've been talking about a cannibal for the last 5 minutes, where this is going. So, the first thing he did was try and bite into her, but he discovered that the skin was tough. So he went out to the market, leaving the body behind, and brought a bigger blade. He came back, cut her up, 8 parts of her, cooked in 8 more parts, and put the rest in the fridge. Again, in the interview with Vice, he goes into a lot of detail. I'm not going to get into that detail any further than I already have then. But I will give you a bit of an insight into the whole taste aspect. So he said, it was the first moment that I actually felt a sort of sexual pleasure in eating her, as if my inner body was on fire. Also, you know how beef or whale meat has a sort of beastly smell to it? Human meat is odourless. I actually believe that human meat is the tastiest of all meats. It doesn't have any of that gamey smell. When I ate some more a couple of days later, just before I got arrested, the meat had become sweeter and it tasted great. As you can see, he's mad as a bag of cats. Now, I want you to remember that this is a man that says things like this with what comes next. So, after a few days, he cut the body up, put it in 2 suitcases, and tried to dump it in a lake. He called a cab, which drove him and the suitcases. However, a small man with 2 heavy suitcases struggling through the park caused suspicion, and he immediately tried to hide the cases and run off. He was spotted, and the people who spotted him running off with some cases had a look, called the police, and the police spoke to every taxi driver who had picked up anyone Japanese. Sagawa made no attempt to run away. He knew he'd be captured. He was just surprised it took them 2 days. Anyway, he was arrested. There was no doubt he'd committed the murder. There was no doubt he cut up the body, because he instantly said, well, the rest of us in the fridge. He told the police he was done killing. This has washed away his obsession, but the police obviously aren't going to take this sort of chance to let that go. His family had an enormously expensive defence lawyer, and there now follows one of the most remarkably unbelievable chain of events in modern crime. So, after a 2-year period being held ready for trial, a French judge deemed Sagawa insane and unfit for trial, partly because of the kind of quotes I've just given you. So he was placed indefinitely in an asylum for the criminal insane. 3 psychiatric assessors said Sagawa would never be cured, and he would be there for the rest of his life. He wasn't. So Sagawa hated the asylum because he didn't want to mix with people he considered mad. Not sure what the rest of the asylum thought of him. Probably stayed at a distance. Instead, he began to write to Japan to complain, and he achieved a level of celebrity. The writer... I was going to read out the name of the writer, but I feel I will only cause offence to anyone Japanese who's listening. So I'll just say a writer published a mixture and confessional narrative called In the Fog. It became popular in Japan. Paris Match, the French magazine, published the crime scene photos. And the French government, growing increasingly annoyed at having people from Japan write to them, at having people in France looking at these photos, and complaints that he hadn't had a trial, coupled with Sagawa's father, who was working on a very clever plan, meant France decided they were going to deport Sagawa back to Japan so he could be committed in a psychiatric hospital in Tokyo. The parents agreed. He was flown back to Japan. And here, his father spent a considerable amount of money where he was judged sane. Because the French legal system thought he was going to be in an asylum for the rest of his life, they had sealed the court documents, and when he was sent to an asylum in Japan, the court documents were not. Japanese authorities now had a sane man with no reason to keep locked up, and on 12th of August 1986 he was discharged. He never spent another day detained ever again. He also did not try and blend into a quiet life. For the next 10 years, he became a celebrity speaker. He would turn up wherever he was asked and start discussing what it was like to eat someone. He would say things like, "It melted in my mouth like raw tuna," to a rapturous audience. He wrote books, he appeared in films. Spar magazine had him as a restaurant critic. Now at this point, if I had written this in a novel, you'd go, well, this is utterly stupid, and throw it out the window. But this happened. Songs were written about him. Steve, I don't know if you know the Rolling Stones' Too Much Blood from 1983. This is about him. It gets worse. He played himself in pornographic recreations. At one point, he played the wolf in a film of Little Red Riding Hood. He also wrote an explicit manga all about the murder. However, he began to get even worse. He began to say he should die by being eaten by a European woman to balance things out. Sometimes he would say he didn't need to eat anyone else. On the other times he would say the desire to eat people becomes so intense around June when women start wearing less. Now again, just a typically misogynistic women-blaming comment, but I'm not sure what we really expect from a cannibal murderer. He told Vice magazine in 2009, can you call for people who would willingly be eaten by me in your magazine? I cannot report whether anybody wrote in. Given the state of the world, I'm sure somebody did. However, around the millennium, around the year 2000, karma began to catch up with him. His fame died away. His parents died, and they banned him from their funeral. They were no longer rich. They had considerable debts, and he had no inheritance. He went on to benefits. He couldn't get a job. Obviously, he couldn't get another job. He began to regret not the murder, but having to live a life where everybody knew he was a murderer. He told Vice, "My life will never get better. It would have been much easier to die." And I think there's a lot of people that would have wished he did. Anyway, he began to hope that he would be killed by a beautiful woman. In 2013, he had a cerebral hemorrhage and needed daily care, living with his brother. He mused in 2015. Oh, sorry, Ditch. In order to have Foxy was very kind enough to raid us, so we started a bit earlier in order to get that in. It is normally midnight start, but I wanted to tie it all together today because Foxy was being very kind to offer it. We'll just get to the end and we'll do some shout outs. He became convinced that if he had been given the therapy he had first asked for, come back to the beginning and start again. I've got 6 stories lined up and this is the second, so we shall see how we get on. But don't worry. This is a good time to say, if you ever miss any of these streams, there is a VOD on Twitch, and it all gets uploaded to YouTube. Thank you, Ditch. That was a perfect way of crowbarring that in. Anyway, as recently as 2017, he was the subject of a documentary. It wasn't really a documentary. They just sort of let him ramble on for the whole time. The team behind the documentary, called Cannibal, liked to muse on things like, is this the repressed preternatural longing of us all? Well, no. Because Sagawa was a man who confessed it's simply a fetish. This is not a call to our genetic past. This is simply an insane man. He died from pneumonia on 24th November 2022. He was 73. And that's how he got away with murder. He literally got away with murder and became a very strange celebrity. Right. So let's do some shout outs. Tom Hanson's in the chat. He's a brilliant drummer. Not only is he a great drummer, but he's also the kind of guy that will let you throw anything at him. I can't explain to you how much I respect a man that can drum well along to a song he's never heard before. As a non-musician, this seems to me like if somebody asked me to climb Everest. I don't know how you do that. Anyway, also Ditch Boy is a brilliant gaming streamer. Test tomatoes ready. Ditch Boy is a brilliant gaming streamer. He can get inside the workings of a game like nobody else I've ever met. And if you see Ditch streaming a game, you will learn more about and level up your game if you go and see him. All right. I'll get told off for that, I think. Never mind. I believe that, but gets tomatoes ready. Okay. We'll just have a little pause and then we'll get on to another one. Now, the next story I have picked deliberately because there is a discussion point. Lunch is on Tuesday. Yeah, fair enough. So I picked this deliberately. We're going to discuss a man who was convicted of some terrible crimes, but was never convicted of any murders. And the question, this isn't an exam, right? You don't have to do this. But at the end, I'm going to go, do you think he did kill people? Or do you think that part of the story is too far? Yeah, for everyone in the chat, I have known Ditch. Ditch is my oldest friend. When he says lunch is on me, he genuinely means like I'm going to have to pay for lunch now. Yeah, 35 years, yeah. Ditch knows the time like a criminal sentence. He's served more time than half the people I mention on this stream. Okay. Right. We'll do we'll do this. So bear in mind at the end I'm going to ask you, do you think you did it? You still owe me 1 minute for my better skill. Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I think you'll be waiting for that for a while. I think they might. I think that don't like buy anything on loan for that. I'm going to be honest with you. I think this man did it. So I'm going to be referencing the fact when I make references to this. I'm going to be saying he did this. But I want you to know there is technically some doubt, and I'll explain why. But you'll see as we go on. So, this is entitled David Parker Ray and the Toy Box. So David Parker Ray was definitely a sadistic, torturing rapist. He was convicted for this, and he died in prison. But was he a serial killer? The police have attached him to 40 murders, but they have never found any bodies, and they have never publicly announced the identity of anybody he might actually have killed, apart from one person who he was never charged for. Somebody else was. We'll get into all of that. So, did he do this? So David Parker Ray was born in Bela, New Mexico, on the 6th of November 1939. His father Cecil was a mechanic, and his mother was Nettie. The siblings lived with Nettie's parents on their ranch. Ray experienced two extremes. The grandparents were incredibly strict. His father was a drunken alcoholic who gave Ray sadomasochistic pornography. Having said his grandparents were very strict, I also need to tell you that his grandmother thought he was a reincarnation of her deceased son. So it's not starting well, is it, on that? Just a sec, chaps, be right back. Sorry, sorry about that. Yes, Ditch is saying Polly may have demanded attention. If you are following this stream regularly, you'll be interested in the cat, no doubt. She decided to give me a heart attack. Normally she goes out for 10 minutes, has a little wander around. Today she went out and disappeared for an hour before returning. This is the first time she's done anything like this. She comes back. She seems fine. I'm very nervous, wondering where she is, wandering around looking for her. So, obviously, Stern father grounded her, which lasted in about an hour until she let her out again. Anyway, I'm sure you're not here for cat stories. Well, I'm sure you are here for cat stories, if we're honest. Yeah, if you're interested in cats and true crime, hit up the last VOD, because there's two crime-solving kitties in it, and I'm not even joking. Also, that's where we announced that the future will be a children's book about a detective cat. I mean, clearly someone's got to do it. It's the Gruffalo, isn't it? Anyway, it's unclear when Ray first started dreaming of rape and torture, or perhaps murder. Oh, thank you. Good Lord, Ditch Boys tipped $20. Good Lord, thank you very much. That's really good. Which I'm going to use to pay for this lunch I now have to pay for. So I feel that's fine. Great, thanks very much. Yes, if anyone... thank you for reminding me. I probably should have pointed this out 52 minutes ago. At the bottom, if you want information about me, there is exclamation shop, there is exclamation tip, and there's exclamation S, and they will give you lots more information. we've got lots of shout-out abilities now. Thanks to Steve for helping me set all that up. He told an FBI agent that as a teenager, he built a spiritual forerunner of what we're going to find out is called the toy box. This was a huge grove of trees, a quarter of a mile from his house. He took an axe and made a little tunnel. He would go and sit in the middle of the tunnel and think about his fantasies. He hung ropes up, dreaming of hanging people from them, and he hung bottles up because they were an easily available thing he could dream of using to abuse people with. His first wife claimed he told her he'd committed his first murder when he was 18, tying a woman to a tree, murdering her, torturing her and murdering her. Police have never been able to find any candidate for this story to be true. There's no body, there's no relative missing person. On finishing high school, Ray joined the army, was honourably discharged, became a student under the GI Bill. He claimed to have been a firefighter, a construction worker, an aircraft mechanic, but he finally started doing maintenance. Yes, Ditch says he sounds in strong need of psychiatric help. Oh yes, he definitely is. And unlike Sagawa, he never tried to get it. He started working for the New Mexico Parks Department in a place called Truth or Consequences. Now, if you want to give your town a somewhat threatening name, I think Truth or Consequences is perfect, and I assure you, it is a real city in New Mexico. Yeah. So he worked here for the rest of his free life. He had a sideline. He made custom fetish equipment for private clients. He told the FBI he would advertise in magazines. People would send him plans, and he'd follow it through. He said making the fetish equipment was peaceful. And he married and divorced 4 times. He had 2 children, one of whom was Glenda Jessie Jean Ray. We will meet Jessie soon as she helps him with his crimes. In 1997, he acquired a partner called Cindy Hendy. She was wanted on theft and drugs charges. She, like Ray, was sexually violent and again became a willing participant in his campaign. Now, while we don't know if Ray was a killer, and we'll get to that, I think he is, but we do know he was a prolific abductor, torturer, and raper of women. We don't know how many people he did this to, but it was a lot. How did he do this? He brought a cargo trailer. He parked it on his property. He called it the toy box and spent $100,000 soundproofing it and filling it with every conceivable tool of inflicting pain possible. There were also chains and pulleys. There was a coffin he would put people in. He had a sign up saying Satan's Den, and on the walls he had an instruction manual he'd written to break people. Neighbours not comment? Yes, well, I can give you some context on the whole neighbours aspect. Firstly, he lived on a large open property. He was not exactly in the kind of housing I'm used to, dense estates. He was on a large area. A bit later we'll come to the fact that somebody escapes and runs off. They have to go quite a while to find a neighbour who will help them, and B, in running quite a while to find a neighbour who will help them, 2 cars drive past and don't bother stopping. There was not a huge amount of interest in interfering, and it was soundproofed, of course, so the fact he'd just parked a trailer was not suspicious. This is the context. So we don't know how many women he held, but he would hold them for months at a time. He would take what he did, firstly for his own enjoyment, but he also played it back for the victims. Hendy is on tape, ordering victims about and joining in. Some victims were released of a sort. He drugged them heavily until they couldn't remember what was going on, and then dumped them. So, there's the question of the transcript. Before he began his torture, Ray would play an audio tape for the victims, explaining what would happen to them. This was a psychological weapon that he used. He found it was incredibly effective to terrify people. These tapes have never been released to the public. and there were many alleged transcripts on the internet. Almost none of them have never been verified. I have never, not using them in the book, you can't rely on them. The only possible one to my mind is in a 2022 Lost Media Wiki user, Tom Server, aka Joseph Pastoris, claims he submitted Freedom of Information requests and after much work managed to use the New Mexico Inspection of Public Records Act to request a 5-minute MP3 recording of what they said the tape was. The transcript was uploaded to the Internet Archive. It is still on the Internet Archive. Now, I'm not 100% confident this is real, but it is the most likely one. I am also not going to read it out. This is, although a true crime stream, I hope people are actually enjoying it. They will not enjoy it if I start reading out what's in this transcript, but it's on the Internet Archive. You can find it quite easily. Apparently it's on YouTube, so there we go. But again, be careful you get the right one. So this is reproduced in the book. The book is more of a reference work, True Crime Dossiers 3. So it's in there, it's a reference work. But this is not what we're going to do on this stream. What you will notice if you go to read this, and if you don't want to do that, and that's 100% fine, I'll tell you that he plays down actually killing anybody. He says maybe as a last resort. Now, when he was arrested by the FBI, he tried to explain why he's got these tapes. He said he spent thousands of hours sitting in a chair, talking through his fantasies as if he's telling a girl what he's doing. That's just the way he liked to express things. Anyway, the question of victims. It's believed Ray would capture 4 or 5 women each year, and he operated for years. Very few. Now, this is another problem. Very few victims have ever been identified. Ray wrote a diary that implied he killed most of them, but after he was arrested, he told the police he had indeed killed them. But then he backtracked and said these diaries were simply his fantasies. So. We'll jump ahead a little bit. Police believe he raped and murdered up to 40 women, but there are no bodies. There have been considerable amounts of searches. No bodies have been found. No public, very few possible victims have ever been released to the press. We'll get into a few more below, a few of the possibilities below. Hendy claimed he cut the victims up and dumped them in lakes or ravines. She couldn't lead police to a site. No one's found it. So, this doesn't necessarily mean he didn't kill people. It just means he's not been charged with it. So, possible victims. Billy Bowers was a 53-year-old co-owner of a used car business. He disappeared in 1988. His body was found in Elephant Butte Lake and identified in 1999 via dental records. He'd been shot in the head. Ray had done work for Bowers' firm and did claim he killed him, but there was not enough evidence to press this. Jill Troy was 22 when she was last seen on a night out with Ray's daughter. She disappeared and was never seen again. There was a description in the diaries which may match Troyer, but again, it's unclear. Of international interest, according to Ray's diaries, in December 1995, he abducted an Australian woman called Connie. She was 18 and blonde, and he tortured and killed her. Now, police found this description, and they found a letter written to Connie from a man named Mark. But the Australian Federal Police and the FBI have both been unable to work out who Connie might have been. They can't find a body. They can't find a missing persons report. They can't find Mark. So I'm going to read out a few of the details here. I'm not expecting anyone to ever come across this video and suddenly realise, but I think it's important that people wanting help, so we might as well do the positive part. So, Mark lived in London for 12 months in 1988. He lived in Canada for 18 months around 89. His address in June 90 with Old Southhead Road, Bellevue Hill, New South Wales. He worked in Sydney around 1990 in a hospital for people with developmental disabilities. He spent the Queen's birthday in 1990 in Melbourne. He was studying for exams in social policy in June 1990. He jogged with gay frontrunners around June 1990, and he lived in Paris for around 6 months. If anyone ever reads this, and that rings a bell, please do contact the FBI. Also possibly unknown, a sack of body parts was pulled out of the river. Nobody knows who these might belong to, or if there is any connection to Ray. So, now we get on to how he was caught. Because he was caught, and he did die in prison. Not for murder, but for other things. So, he was caught because of the bravery of Cynthia Vigil. Cynthia had been working as a prostitute and agreed to do a job for Ray. Ray and Hendy told Cynthia they were cops, and she was under arrest. Unfortunately, it was only by the time she realised their method of arrest included duct tape that it was too late. They drove her to the toy box and began to abuse her. They played her the tape, which narrated what was going to happen, and then began the torture. On the third day, when Ray went to work, Vigil realised a set of keys had been left nearby. She wasn't going to let this moment pass. She reached the keys and tried to call the police, but Hendy caught her. There was a fight. Vigil was not messing about. She stabbed Hendy with an ice pick, and although naked and just changed, she ran for help. 2 cars saw her and drove past her. However, she did manage to get to a neighbour of Ray's, who was in a mobile home and watching TV. They called the police. The police went to Ray and Hendy, who said they were simply friends trying to help Cynthia break a heroin addiction. There was a simple solution to this, and the police took it. They got a warrant and searched the property. They found the toy box. Ray and Hendy were arrested and charged with kidnapping, aggravated battery, and much more. It was at this point the police realised they had made a horrible mistake. What I found when researching these serial killer stories is an awful lot of the time opportunities to capture them, stop them early, and missed. The police realised that a woman called Angelica Montano had been lured to Ray's house by Hendy on the pretence of collecting baking supplies. She'd suffered their attacks, but had convinced them into dumping her on the side of the road. She was, and she found an off-duty policeman, but he didn't believe her and took her to a bus stop. She rang the police, but her report was never followed up. The FBI had previous in ignoring things too. A woman now rang the FBI when news of this had got out and pointed them to her daughter-in-law. She had only been married for a few days before she went missing and returned confused. The family had assumed she'd just gone on some sort of drugs bender. A study of one of Ray's videotapes, however, allowed investigators to confirm by her ankle tattoo that she was a victim. She was called Kelly Garrett. They managed to find Garrett alive in Colorado and now willing to help. She explained that after an argument with her husband, she went out with friends, including Ray's daughter Jessie. Jessie then offered her a lift home, but instead drove her to the toy box. She was tortured and drugged and then released, found semi-conscious by her husband. She had no memory of what had happened to her, did not call the police, and her husband divorced her because he thought well, I guess you can draw a line under that. They also realised that Jessie had contacted the FBI herself. So I'm going to give you a quote here from Amarillo.com. It says, in June 1986, Jessie Ray volunteered to the FBI in New Mexico, confirming her father, FBI agent Doug Belden, said. She alleged that Parker Ray was abducting and torturing women and selling them to buyers in Mexico. The allegations were non-specific, with no names given and no murders mentioned. For 1 year thereafter, the FBI in New Mexico conducted an investigation in an effort to substantiate the allegations. So the investigation went nowhere. He concludes with, when the logical investigation was completed and leads were covered, the case was closed. So, with all that new information, the FBI swarmed over the toy box, found all the equipment, and found no bodies. However, they had enough to charge Ray for his crimes against Vigil, Montano and Garrett. Unfortunately, a judge ruled they had to be tried separately, whereas prosecutors wanted to use them to support each other. The judge ruled that much of the evidence during the raid, including the audio tape, couldn't be used in Garrett or Montano's cases because they couldn't be proved they were existence then. However, Hendy took a plea deal and told everybody all she knew, although she couldn't take people to bodies. Sadly, Angelica Montano died of pneumonia, her experiences having driven her into drug addiction. Ray's first trial began on May 23rd for Kelly Garrett's abuse. At first, Ray claimed this was all part of a sexual fantasy, a fantasy life he had lived out. He said any sex he had been involved in was consensual. He frequently hired prostitutes for large sums of money at a time and had a safe word system for a consensual sadism. In the first trial, it was a mistrial because the jurors could not agree. Two people were convinced he was innocent. Kelly had been completely honest, which meant having to admit her memory was damaged and some details were vague. However, she was adamant that she would never have consented to what was shown in the video. One juror, who thought Ray was innocent, later told the New York Daily News, "I was not positive he was torturing her. There's a lot of people who enjoy rough sex." But then things changed. A retrial found him guilty. He then went on trial for vigils attacks, but he caved. He agreed a plea deal to save his daughter, who had been proven to be involved. He was given 220 years in prison for abduction, rape and torture. Jesse was given 30 months in prison plus 5 years probation. The surviving victims approved this deal. Although Cindy Hendy had testified Ray, she still got 36 years in prison. However, she was released in 2019 and is currently free. She was unable to take anybody to the site of any bodies. Before we get to the end of this story, I'm going to muddy the waters a bit. We have the case of David Roy Yancey. Sylvia Marie Parker was murdered and Yancey went to prison for it. Ray was never charged with this murder, but Yancey claims that Parker was homeless, living in a tent which Ray had lent her. She brought meth and cocaine from Jesse. She was dating Yancey. Yancey claims that he helped Jesse bring her to the toy box, torture her, and Ray made him strangle her and dump the body. He took the police to where the body was, but it wasn't there. Yancey then said, well, of course, Ray is trying to cover things up. Yancey was charged with kidnapping, tampering with evidence and a lot more, and served 30 years in prison. But there was no forensic evidence correcting Ray, and he was never charged. So Ray had been sentenced in 2001, and he died shortly after. He said in his plea deal that he would help people find the bodies, but he died before any of that could be done. The FBI is still pursuing leads on victims. In 2011, they released a collection of photographs which they wonder are from victims. They did another search. They looked into ravines, caves and the lake, but again couldn't find anything. So Ray is a mystery. Was he a prolific serial killer? And what he wrote in his notes and tapes true? Cynthia thought so, and in a 2000 appeal for informations said, I didn't feel like this was his first time. It was like he knew what he was doing. He told me I was never going to see my family again. He told me he would kill me like the others. Was he so efficient at disposing of bodies that they were never found? However, despite a plea deal, which he did to save his daughter from a longer time in prison, Ray continued to say it was a fantasy in his head, that he hadn't committed the acts he'd written down. He told an interview, it was a source of entertainment to me to create these tapes. That's why there was a disclaimer at the beginning of the tape stating that it was for adult entertainment only. My fantasies are not that unusual. There's approximately 2 million people in the United States that have basically the same fantasies. There's organisation, there's clubs. It's in the closet, what can I say? As well as a lack of bodies, there's been a lack of information on people who may have been victims. You'd think if there were 40 dead people, at least a significant quantity would have been identified from missing persons reports and things. So, we'll get to this in a second, but I do want to add, Cynthia Vigil, the woman that led to him being caught, went on to found Street Safe New Mexico, a support system for prostitutes, homeless people, and others in need. She found it possible to forgive Hendy, saying there was a part of her that was raised victim too. As thanks to her dedication to helping others, a drug conviction she had been given before her experience was pardoned. She continues to do a lot of good. Yes, so I'll get back. Digis asking, was the mental health angle ever explored in his trial? Not that I know of. No, I don't think anybody said he was insane and making this up. The defence argument was it was just a fantasy. So with all of that said, I chat. If you think he was a serial killer, please type 1. If you think he was just a fantasist, please type 2. Alright, for the benefit of everybody not in chat, Ditch Boys type 3, I don't know. That's a legitimate answer. You don't have to know. There are a lot of ones appearing. I also think he was probably a serial killer, based on the type of evidence and stuff I read when putting this together for the book and for this stream. Nonetheless, he does have his defenders. Now, yes, Ditch Boys had an important point here. Ditch Boy says, I think he thought he was. I think that's very true. I think if Ray wasn't actually a serial killer, he definitely was so immersed in this whole experience that he probably did think he did. I think that's an interesting angle. Now, that's been a couple of very hairy stories. I assure you, things are going to lighten up a bit now. Well, no, there's still a few murders, but right, yeah. I'm glad I said it was going to lighten up because Steve's just come in with what we can consider a historical joke, which is I used to regularly destroy packets of Kellogg's cornflakes, Ready Rex, and Cocoa Pops. I was a serial killer. A joke that will never get old. Probably started the day after Mr. Kellogg invented it. So now we're going to do a story where people fight back. There's been a lot of people suffering in this, and now we're going to do a story where the families of those affected strike out. Also, we're going to dial back because this is another catfishing story, and this time the killer is caught by catfishing. So Khalil Wheeler-Weaver seemed innocuous. He was a 20-year-old college student who fitted all the criteria of the stereotypical nerd, the way he dressed, the way he acted. Fishing for cats. I wouldn't advise fishing for cats based on my knowledge of cats, because I think when you get them close to you, they're going to be quite angry, and it's best to stay away from the angry bits. I suppose that's why you'd use a rod, because the angry bits would be at a distance. There's bound to be a Kickstarter for a board game based on this. Like fishing, there's definitely someone's invented a board game about this. And if they haven't, you can have that. Anyone watching can have that idea for free. I'm not going to be doing the catfishing board game, if only because of the complaints. Anyway, do that after the cat detective stories. Yeah. If you think about it, if you're a cat though, right, being a fisherman or a fisher cat would be the perfect job because you just get endless fish. I mean, they've not evolved the ability to fish, but if they had done, they might not need to meow at me so much to open the dreamies. Although I have seen a cat take a fish out of my neighbour's pond, which, given the price of the fish in the pond, was a bit problematic. Yes, cats also like dairy farmers. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Cats were sat there going, well, if we go in those barns, there's that's where the rats gather. People might like us. And also, if we're nice to the big mice, they might keep us warm. And somehow that turned into being slimes. Fair enough. Fun fact, cats are the only animal to have domesticated themselves. I can quite believe it. I would also question the use of the word domesticated in that. I think they tolerate. I think they've worked out how to tolerate. I don't think cats would agree they've been domesticated. Obviously, dogs would be there going, yeah. But sorry, dog fans. I feel this is two streams in a row in which I've said cats are great and dogs aren't. So I'm losing the audience at this point. I feel I need to bring dog fans back on side. Dogs are great. Dogs are great. Yeah, Ditch Boy is a dog guy. I think. I've not got any. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of any crimes that dogs solved. But I will probably try and look that out, because it'll be we need a bit of balance, don't we? We need a bit of balance. All right, we'll get into how Khalil Wheeler-Weaver got caught. So he was a serial killer. He targeted young black women who could be lured with payment for sex. Unfortunately for him, one of his victims was not the sort of person who'd been missed, and her sister and friends catfished him and caught him. There's another point to this. This is a double story, because the predominant evidence at his trial was his phone, and you'll find out why. And if you're ever watching this and you're intending to do something naughty, or you've done something naughty, it's going to make you look at your phone in a slightly different way. Anyway, he was born on April 20th, 1996. His family were heavily involved in policing. His stepfather and uncle had been on the force. The family were well off. He was a reserved figure. He had little social interaction in school. However, he blossomed late. He started DJing, he found a girlfriend, and by 2016 he was a security guard with hopes of joining the police. We now move to Robin Daphne Michelle West. In the August of 2016, she was an exotic dancer. Oh yeah, I should point out, please don't do anything naughty. Legally speaking, this does not constitute advice. Don't, obviously. It goes without saying, don't take any of this stuff as inspiration. Don't do this. This is not a guide for how to live. So by 2016, Robin West was a dancer and prostitute, and she went on holiday with a friend called Bernicia Patterson. After a few days to raise funds, they went to work, and on August 31st, West was picked up in a car by Wheeler-Weaver. Patterson took the license plate number just in case anything bad happened. Wheeler-Weaver sadly drove her to an abandoned house, killed her, and set the building on fire. When the firemen arrived, they didn't realise that the man who had driven off but then come back was indeed the killer. And they hadn't found a body at that point. When they did, it was so damaged by fire that it took 2 weeks to identify her by the teeth. Patterson, however, had gone to the police the next day, given them the licence plate, and given them the news that her friend had gone missing. There was an investigation. They did speak to Wheeler-Weaver, and he admitted he'd been with her. And he took detectives to where he said he'd let her off after their business was done, a location 2 blocks from the burning house. And the police said yeah, and didn't pursue him further. This is going to prove to be a mistake. This was the only one of his victims he set on fire, and we don't know why, but it did fit the people who were his targets, young black women who were or were about to start prostitution, that he felt the police and society would not miss, and he was wrong. His next known victim was Joanne Brown. She'd struggled with mental health and drug addiction and was 33. In 2016, she was also a dancer and a prostitute. And on October 22nd, she was picked up by Wheeler-Weaver. Much like his first victim, she had a backup plan to ensure her safety. She always rang a friend to tell her where she was going. On this occasion, she used Wheeler-Weaver's phone. He took her to an abandoned house, strangled her, and left the body. He then called the number she'd rung, but didn't say anything. Her friend immediately called the police. This investigation did not go very far, and it took 7 weeks before the body was found. This set of people who have given the police information climaxes in one of the I'm gonna call this outright hostility towards sex workers and racism, and what happens next. The next victim, Tiffany Taylor, knew Wheeler-Weaver. She was a prostitute who lived with her mother. She often hung out with him socially, but she turned down his advances. He then started offering to pay her. And eventually she said yes, but her plan was simply to rob him. She arrived, took the money, made its use, and left his life. Her life developed, and she moved into the drug business, and this business included operating out of a hotel room. An unknown number started messaging her for sex. As the offer increased, Taylor decided to rob whoever was messaging her. A date and location was arranged. Wheeler-Weaver arrived at the hotel, but he was wearing a ski mask and gloves. Taylor had no idea who it was, but she was driving her car, so she let him get in and they drove off. Wheeler asked her to pull over, and he smashed her in the head. When she awoke, he was strangling and roping her, asking if she remembered him. She did. However, she was quick thinking. She believed she would be killed, but she had an out. She told him all their conversation was on her phone, and her phone was in the hotel room, and he did not know there were other people in that hotel room. He panicked, stopped what he was doing, and drove them back to the hotel. They went up to the room. She managed to get inside, lock the door, and lock him out. He ran off, but she texted him again to try and lure him back after having rung the police. In a series of events all about the car keys. In the end, he was hiding, watching the police arrive and ran off. Taylor told the police everything she knew. She knew it was Wheeler-Weaver, she knew his address, his phone number, and his social media. So obviously the police went to arrest him. Now, they threatened to arrest her for prostitution. They didn't care. He could have been stopped here, but because of this action, he was free to kill at least one more person. So Sarah Butler was in college. Her love was dancing, but she wasn't enjoying her college experience. She had few friends and disliked her roommates. She decided to find friends through a social media service called Tagged, and was contacted by a user called Little Yacht Rock. He offered her $500 for sex, and with times tough, she considered it. She actually texted him, "You're lost a serial killer, right? Laugh my ass off." She agreed, changed her mind, didn't meet up with him, changed it again, and they arranged to meet. She borrowed her mother's van, drove to him on November 22nd, 2016. They met at the same abandoned house in which Brown's body was still upstairs. They drove to a spot near the cliffs where he strangled her and dumped her. However, Butler's family realised that night that she was missing, and they started looking. They were not going to wait for the police. The vehicle she'd driven was found 4 days later. They went to Butler's home. They knew the password to her laptop, and they fired it up. They started searching for any clues, and they found it. They found evidence that Little Yacht Rock had offered her $500. So they had a plan. They formed a fake profile, one designed to appeal to Little Yacht Rock. They tagged him, and they waited. And he came. Messages started arriving, offering money for sex in the same format he'd sent Butler. The family and the friends spoke to him and managed to get him on a voice call, which they recorded on a second phone. They arranged a meet-up. Coincidentally, when he moved to a voice call, the women were in a police station filing statements, so they only had to walk a few feet to report what they'd done. This time, the police listened. They sent detectives to the meet-up. They met Wheeler-Weaver, but they had to let him leave. There was no body, no proof Little Yacht Rock had committed a crime, nothing to hold him with. However, Butler's body was found on December 1st, thanks to a search based on her cell phone data. Now the police knew there was a crime and there was something to work with. And oh boy, did they have something to work with. While Wheeler-Weaver wore gloves and condoms during his attack, leaving little forensic evidence, although some DNA was found on Butler's fingernails, he carried his phone with him every single place he went, and the police were able to track all of its movement using geolocation. He went to the places where the victims arranged to meet their killer, when they met their killer. He went to the places where the bodies had been dumped, when they'd been dumped. He'd also Googled what poison would kill people. He had Googled the best routes home from the murder sites. Everything. He'd also Googled how to erase phone data so it couldn't be used to track you. But he hadn't done it. Yes, now so Ditch is saying, I'm a little surprised the family left it to the police at that stage. Yes, given the history of this story, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? A few days after Butler's body was found, Wheeler-Weaver was arrested for her murder. Now the police tied it together. Patterson's number plate record was rediscovered, and he was tied to that. Brown's final call was discovered, and it was used to build the whole picture. Finally, these women were being listened to, but it was too late, of course. At the trial, Wheeler-Weaver's defence was that he had met the woman for sex on those days, as per his phone data, but that he hadn't actually been the killer. He called his experience a nightmare. His attorney said, "We are not dealing with some sort of mastermind. This was a 20-year-old kid." Well, no, we're not dealing with a mastermind, because he Googled how to delete evidence off your phone and then didn't do it. He was found guilty on 3 counts of murder, desecration of human remains, attempted murder, 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault, aggravated arson, and kidnapping. West's mother said, Robin Daphne Michelle West did not, and I repeat, did not deserve to be strangled and set on fire in a house, left in a house weighing a little over 600 pounds due to the destruction of that fire. He was given 160 years, but he is eligible for parole after 140 years, and he's still in it. In prison, I mean. However, he may have committed other murders. Since all of that happened, police discovered the case of Mara Doumbia. She was 15 and last seen on October 7th, 2016. She'd been reported missing. There were no leads until May 2019, when her body was found in the unused second floor of a house. Now, if you're wondering how there's an unused second floor of a house, a funeral home used the ground floor. It took 2 years to identify her, but they were able to connect her to Wheeler-Weaver because he tagged her, contacted her untagged, offered her $70 for sex, and they had, again, extensive digital evidence. He is, at the time of this stream, awaiting trial. So you can be highly effectively caught by your mobile phone, which is, I think, obviously a good thing in this instance. So we'll just have a little chat. How are we finding it tonight, chat? No death row, then no kill state. I assume so. I'm not on top of which states kill or do not kill at this point. Clearly that isn't one. I'm sure he would have got the death penalty had there been one. Thank you, Foxy. Yep, I'm glad you're finding it interesting. I know this has been quite heavy. The next one is a lot lighter and is the true dream of every true crime streamer and podcaster. I think if anyone denies that, they're trying to cover up for the fact they want to do it. We'll get to that in a minute. Tortoise. You've mentioned the tortoise a couple of times, and I'm going to admit I don't know where we're going with the tortoise. Tell me what the tortoise is. Is this a reference to the fact that there's a load of cats and you want a crime-solving tortoise? Because a crime-solving tortoise would be interesting, because it would be quite a long search for the evidence, wouldn't it? Oh, you're hoping there was a tortoise equivalent? Yeah, yeah. I feel like a tortoise crime solver would have had to have been in an era sort of before the internet or even before telegraphy. You know, when you had to actually send letters or stuff. I feel a tortoise is a real who'd pre Agatha Christie sort of crime solving incident. I feel like Father Brown could have had a tortoise involved. I know he's not real, but I do like Father Brown. It's a highly enjoyable show. Yeah, I feel I've got more chance of finding dogs than Father Brown. I'll be honest. Parrots, yeah. Oh, actually, there's bound to be, yeah. Parrots and that habit of repeating what people say. I'm convinced I could find you a parrot story. I really am. Also, I mean, does piracy cover true crime? That's cheating, obviously. Um, it is crime, but I don't think it counts as true crime. I think pirates are very much their own thing, but I mean, you know, parrots. I'm sure there's bound to be loads of pirate historians going. Parrots are just like a trope. I know. I'm just we're just having a laugh about animals. If it's crime and it's true, this yes. How far can I stretch this? Actually, how far can I stretch this? In the first True Crime Dossiers book, I did a story on somebody that made and sold fake bomb detectors. They invented what was essentially um, it was essentially a dowsing rod. Sorry if you're a fan of dowsing, but I'm now going to slag off that. But essentially, it was worse than a dowsing rod, and they invented it, and they sold millions of dollars worth to different countries around the world, and people were actually using them and dying. So it was a crime that killed people, but it was just a massive grift. Yeah. In fact, if there's interest, I'll do it. I'll give you the names. I'll talk you through everything that happens on another stream. Let me know either in chat or in Discord. Yeah, it's you don't sort of think. You think sort of if someone's going to get killed, you know, like murders and stuff. But there's plenty of occasions where people commit some crimes that have terrible follow-on effects. Oh, Steve says they're both watching me on the big telly. I'm not a small man. I'm probably very much not small on the big telly. Karen says he's brilliant. Oh, thank you. This is another show that makes me hope there's some sort of afterlife karma. Yes, yes. What I've noticed, can confirm he's not small. Do you want this meal or not? What I've noticed, I've been watching true crime streams for many years, and very few streamers of true crime have a long career. They burn out on the subject matter. Now, fortunately, I balance this with history and fiction and lots of other things, and I find the storytelling aspect fun. So I've never really felt that weight, but yeah, I think that a lot of people that do this subject for a while do get weighed down by the fact that there does appear to be sort of almost often no justice, and justice becomes a very meaningless concept because there's people that do things that you can't possibly balance out, that you can't possibly punish or change, you know, and I think that can get quite affecting. I hope the aim of these streams is that there is enough humour and the stories are told in such a way that you don't go away depressed. You sort of, this is supposed to be interesting. This is interesting, and it's a look at humanity. And some of these stories are done as warnings. My con men stories are mostly done, so maybe you'll think twice at certain points. But yeah, it can be. But I think that's the other thing. I'm a historian. I've been studying history for more than all my adult life. And what you find in history is that is also full of unrelentingly grim stuff that you've got to try and take some positivity from. Now there'll be historians out there that will have lovely careers and talk lovely and flowery and love it all. But what I've learned from reading about stuff, there's a lot of darkness, and I came to true crime from being a historian, so I already had a very dim view of human nature. So Steve's got an Alan Partridge quote: "There is no justice in the world, Christian Laveau." I do like Alan Partridge. I have found a comedy spoof video. It's just a short spoof. It's brilliant, and I think it'll really. I'm going to save it for one really. Well, I'll do some really egregiously horrible thing, and then I'll turn it around so you'll go away like, okay, so I'll save it for that. I showed Steve earlier. It's quite funny. I've given it away now because I wasn't going to tell you it was a spoof until after we've watched it. I was just going to play it. So forget I said that. One day there'll be a video and you'll be like, and then I'll go, no, it's a joke, but it's a funny one. So we'll do a story where people win now. And it's the story of Tara Grinstead and the True Crime Podcaster. After this stream, I'm off to YouTube to watch Random Acts of Kindness videos. Yeah, I did spend a long time wondering how to pitch this. You do the prep work for this, and you think, am I really going to improve anyone's day by talking about this? But I guess there is an audience, so hopefully the audience that enjoys this will enjoy it. And I suppose I find even saying enjoy possibly the wrong word, but it's fascinating. Perhaps more than enjoy, so we shall see. It's interesting to learn about these things, yeah. And it's not all going to be serial killers. There's a few other crazy things. One day I'm going to do the Hatton Garden robbery, which is like what's the director? Guy Ritchie. The Hatton Garden robbery is like a Guy Ritchie film, but more unbelievable. It's got everything. So we'll do that one night, and we'll just get into a proper. I don't know what that word is. So. Ditch. What is that? What's that word? Right, well, while we wait for that, we'll get into Tara Grinstead. So Tara Grinstead. Oh, I believe it's where you sink a ship for the insurance. Ah, right, well. Right, I didn't know this, so Ditch has got a fact. Barratry is where you sink a ship for the insurance. Ah. Make your Titanic jokes here. Anyway, yes, interesting. I'll have to look into that. That's really good. Right. Well, Well, you're going to be googling Random Acts of Kindness videos, and I'm going to be googling barratry. Fraud or gross negligence of a ship, master or crew, at the expense of its owners or users. Interesting. Now, I've hinted a couple of times that, like at Halloween and other events, we'll do some mysteries. Some mysteries that aren't really crime but are a bit paranormally. So obviously we'll do the Mary Celeste because that's an old time. That's an old time classic. We probably won't do. I think it's called the Orang Medan because I think I've got the name wrong, but I think it's been completely solved. I don't believe that's a mystery anymore. I think there's a very reasonable explanation for that. Or perhaps we should do it because there's a very reasonable explanation for that. We shall see. Okay, so Tara Grinstead was a teacher when she went missing in 2005. Despite extensive work, no trace of her fate could ever be found. However, a true crime journalist podcast began to stir the local community up into revisiting the mystery, and he has been credited as helping prompt the tip-off that led to 2 arrests and 2 convictions. But as you know, I like to do stories that have twists and real oddities, and the twist here is not just that a true crime journalist helped get convictions. The twist is there were 2 convictions for disposal of a corpse, but no murder. So we're going to get to how that could possibly happen. Essentially, imagine a bowl of cold, coagulated spaghetti. This is where we're heading. So, Tara Grinstead was born in Hawkinsville, Georgia, USA, on the 14th of November 1974. She had 1 sister and a perfectly normal upbringing. She was able to win the title of Miss Tifton, entered Miss Georgia, and the money helped put her through college. She graduated with a master's degree from Valdosta State University and started teaching history, great subject, at Auxilia Irwin County High School in 1998. As well as teaching, she helped girls enter beauty pageants. On October 22nd, 2005, she was first helping contestants at the Miss Sweet Potato pageant. Can be honest, I'm not sure how many sweet potatoes you can eat if you want to enter a pageant. I thought they were quite sugary. I try and avoid them. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, she went to a barbecue, left just before 10:30, and was never seen again. People realised she was missing on October 24th when she didn't get to work. College called police and they went to her home. They were instantly concerned because she had vanished, but her car, her dog, her cat, and her cell phone were still there, although her wallet and keys were absent. Police immediately raised the case to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, who examined the house again. There hadn't been a struggle, there hadn't been a break-in, but her bedside clock was out by 6 hours. A lamp was broken in half, and there was an envelope with $100 in it on her car's dashboard. Furthermore, the driver's seat had been moved to accommodate someone tall, but Grinstead was 5'3". There was also a business card stuck in the front door. The business wasn't relevant, but how was it there? So the police found very little information to work with, but they also found something else. There was a latex glove lying on the property, in a place where it was unlikely to have arrived accidentally. What's more, they were able to get DNA from the sample, or from the glove. But there is a major, major problem with DNA, in that if you find some DNA, it's only useful if you can match that DNA. Investigators compared their sample to as many men as were found relevant. All the men in Grinstead's life, male suspects, they added to the local and national DNA databases. They did not find any matches. The initial suspects included Grinstead's ex-boyfriend. Oh yes, so Dish is making a very good point. To be fair, it is useful to not match the DNA to rule people out. This is true. The DNA match would have got rid of a huge number of potential suspects. But as we're about to find out, they weren't very good at ruling people out either. Yeah, it's one of those cases. Latex. Yeah, not the spinal tap sort. Anyway, so one of the first witnesses was her ex-boyfriend, who dated her for 6 years, left her and recently returned with a new girlfriend. He and Grinstead had been seen arguing. Witnesses say he told her it was definitely over. Was he a suspect? Well, he was ruled out. There was also a former student. He claimed he'd had an affair with Grinstead. She claimed he stalked her. And finally, Grinstead had made a complaint about a police officer who had been friends with her ex. And that was that for a few years. The trial went cold, but people didn't stop looking. In 2008, there was a burst of publicity when CBS used their 48 Hours mystery show to talk about Grinstead and compare her disappearance to Jennifer Cass, who had disappeared in Orlando 3 months later. It was at this point when they announced they had the DNA. It's this interest that's probably why Grinstead appeared in a hoax. In 2009, Andrew Haley began an online campaign. Obviously, it was an online campaign because this just gets ridiculous. He pretended to be an active serial killer who viewers could catch if they played his game. He created a series of videos obscuring himself, calling himself the Catch Me Killer, talking about 16 women he'd murdered. It looked like one of the victims was a reference to Grinstead. However, Andrew Haley was not a criminal genius. The police subpoenaed YouTube, got his ISP, found his address, and went round and got him. And the whole thing was fake. He hadn't killed anybody. He was convicted for a hoax. He was no clue in finding Grinstead. Waterways were searched, a pond was drained, $100,000 reward was offered, and in 2010, Grinstead was declared dead. But no one gave up. In this instance, no one gave up. The GPI said they had got leads arriving weekly. And then, in 2016, something remarkable happened. Following the success of the True Crime podcast serial, which really launched a revival of popular true crime interest, Atlanta creator Payne Lindsay wanted to do the same thing himself. So he set out to investigate a real unsolved crime. He started the Up and Vanish podcast. Grinstead's disappearance was local. Perfect. He didn't have access to any police files, but he was local. He could go and interview people, as many as he could. So he did. And the more people he interviewed, the more other people were willing to talk to him. There was a snowball effect. And the whole community began to reevaluate, rethink what had happened. Also, Dr. Maurice Godwin reached out. He'd been hired by Grinstead's family as a private detective. He hadn't managed to solve the case, but he joined forces with the podcaster. We're going to get to the tip which came that led to arrests, but Lindsay's role was vital. As he said to Cosmopolitan UK, the podcast created an environment in this small Georgia town that was almost like a pressure cooker. Everyone around you was talking about the case openly for the first time ever. So if you were someone who was walking around with a dark secret, it became very difficult to keep that secret. Certainly, people were feeling the pressure. Who were they going to interview next? Are they going to talk to someone who knows what I know? That's what created this fear in people who knew what happened, and I think that's ultimately what led to the tip coming forward. Now, that is not just some podcaster bigging himself up, because at the press conference, the police made a comment which is universally believed to refer to Lindsay. They said, "You guys have been phenomenal in this whole endeavour. Please know that you have had an impact, a significant role in this investigation. And I'm confident that today we have reached the point where we are in this investigation because of that involvement." So, in early 2017, the leads the police were following crystallised when a tip came in. Now, I apologise in advance for the fact that we're going to discuss two men, one whose surname is Duke and one whose surname is Jukes. This is just an unfortunate incident. They're not related, but you're going to have to... I'm not promising this will be the clearest thing I ever stream. I will try my best to do this and not just make you go, which one? Anyway, so Ryan Alexander Duke had been a student at the school where Grinstead taught. They also arrested twins. They're not related, but they also arrested Bo Dukes. Now, I don't. My memory, right, of the Dukes of Hazzard is like 40 years old. But wasn't Bo Duke in the Dukes of Hazzard? Chat, if anybody knows this, I've never actually googled it, but I've actually sat thinking, is that? Or am I thinking of something else? Bo and Luke Duke, yes, yeah. You're making Karen giggle, yeah. It isn't that Bo Dukes? Although yes, I know the Dukes of Hazzard isn't real, so it couldn't have been. It's just really unfortunate that there is genuinely a Bo Duke, and he may have killed someone. So anyway, Beau Jukes was already wanted by the police in connection with a series of sexual assaults. And the tip came from Brooke Sheridan. She was dating Jukes. And Beau Jukes had made what could be considered the schoolboy error of telling Brooke all about how he'd helped cover the murder up for Ryan Duke. Was Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane involved? There is a car involved, you know. Do you ever talk about something serious and make a comment and then think, maybe I shouldn't have mentioned the Dukes of Hazzard? Sounded excellent when I was closer to the mic. Yeah, I think we're experimenting. We're tweaking all the time. We will tweak getting closer to the mic. Derailed yourself there, yeah. That was totally on me. Normally I rely on chat to derail me, but I totally screwed that up myself. That's on me. Anyway, so police revealed that they were convinced Ryan Duke had broken into Grinstead's home to rob it, been discovered, killed her. That's a hard job, yeah. Yeah, it is, and you're good at it. Killed her and then hidden the body, aided by Jukes. So Ryan Duke was indicted for malice murder, felony murder, burglary, aggravated assault, and concealing a death. Ryan Duke also led them to where he said the pair had disposed of the body, which was a farm owned by Beau Duke's family. The police found bone fragments. It was only as these results came in, and despite the fact Grinstead had been declared dead, that her family finally gave up. And to add insult to injury, Grinstead's sister Anita had been friends with the Duke's family for years. So with all due respect to our podcaster here, it could have been solved without him, because John McCulloch came forward. He had been friends with Jukes during army basic training, and at the trial he explained that during a break from the army, the two went together to Georgia. Jukes had taken alcohol and cocaine. So that made it sound like he was having a rum and coke. I actually mean it was on cocaine. They were sat in a car. And as McCulloch told the jury, he seemed like something was bothering him. It started to come out. He said, "You're my battle buddy, right?" He was like, "Man, I need to tell you something." Duke confessed a fat friend had killed Grinstead, come to him for help, and they had disposed of the body. They burned the body and let it burn as long as they could, McCulloch said, and once they were satisfied, they buried the rest. McCulloch claimed he went to the police once he had finished training, and they said, "We get tips like this all the time, it's pointless," and never went any further. So the family suffered needless years. Anyway, Beau Duke's trial was first. And this is a really important element. He went first. He went on trial for helping cover up the murder. He went on trial in 2019. He was convicted for covering up the murder, and he was given 23 years. He didn't testify at either trial. Afterwards, he made a plea deal for the 2 counts of rapes he'd been charged with. He was sentenced to serve those 20 years at the same time he was in the prison for the 23 years for Grinstead, which some would argue was a bit of a cheap way out by the legal team. Probably should have had him in there for a lot longer. And then Ryan Duke went on trial for the murder. So remember, Beau Dukes has been convicted of covering up the murder, which he says Ryan did. Ryan went on trial. He'd initially told detectives he'd killed Grinstead after breaking into her house to steal for drugs, been surprised, hit her in a way he didn't remember, which killed her, and then he'd burned her body in a pecan orchard. But he pled not guilty. He claimed he was innocent and that Beau Dukes had done the murders. Concurrent versus consecutive, yeah, exactly. So he served them all simultaneously through, whereas I think he ought to have done them. Is it one after another? But there we go. So he claimed not guilty, claiming he was innocent. He said he gave his confession because he was sleep deprived, on drugs, and scared of Dukes. He stated that Dukes had come and found him for help in disposing of the body. He claimed that Dukes had molested the corpse. Steve Ford had tipped $5. Thank you very much, Steve. That's very generous of you. Obviously, as you've been watching this, you know that all tips today will go for paying the lunch I have to buy Ditch Boy for winding him up. So if anyone wants to give us, I don't know if that's how you do it. I'll be getting messages going, that's not how you encourage people to tip. But there we go. He also said he lied about his confession because he was afraid that Bo Dukes was going to kill him. Let's not say what that's for. Yeah. So he said, if Bo Dukes is capable of killing Grinstead, that's enough reason to be scared of him. He could kill him. So, detectives, of course, were now able to match the DNA to Ryan Duke. I don't want to fill him in. Yeah, no, you're not getting that. The state attorneys argued Ryan Duke confessed to the murder over and over again with his words, his action, his DNA. Defence attorneys said this case is about power and influence, the people who have it and the people who don't. Ryan Duke has neither, Bo Dukes have both. However, just to throw in an extra complication, a phone call Ryan Duke made from prison, which was recorded, he said he'd been sleeping with Grinstead, which at this point I think is probably just a slur on her. Anyway, so do you remember earlier on when Ditch said the DNA could be used to rule people out? Well, now we've got to an interesting event in the trial. Prosecutors noted that there had been an earlier tip shortly after the murder. During a party a month later, as the pecan orchard, somebody rang the police. Somebody rang the police to say, at a party a month later at the pecan orchard, Bo Duke said, "Yeah, we killed her and we burned her here." CBI agent Gary Rothwell, in a follow-up after the trial, said that is a question that has bothered me for years. I've talked to other agents and reviewed the documents, and this is not an excuse for what happened. The local police deemed the suspicions unfounded and did not pursue them. Rothwell said this was a presumption that we should never ever have made, but it happened and it's my fault. And therefore years passed. Now, in the end, Ryan Dukes was found not guilty of murder. He was found guilty of concealing a death and given just 10 years in prison. To this day, everybody knows that these two men burned and buried Mrs. Grinstead, but nobody really knows who actually killed her. They blame each other. Ryan's parole, however, was denied in 2023, so he will serve all 10 years. Prosecutors, however, are certain they declined to charge Bo Dukes with the murder, as they still believe Ryan did it and didn't think there'd be any point because he didn't do it. So, now normally, like if I did something like this, I would go, "Who do you think did it?" But I think I've confused everybody enough with the fact that they've both got both the same name. If everybody just types Duke in chat, that'll cover it. You know, that pretty much is gonna cover everything, isn't it? Right. It is 1 a.m. and I have one prepped left. You may not believe this. I prep all this stuff beforehand. So I prepped 6 for today. I've got one left, and this is called The Journalist Who Knew Too Much. So we have done a true crime journalist who caught a killer. Where do you think I have planned to take this stream next? Yes, it's the journalist who was the killer. I do actually, I do plan this. Like, I know it doesn't seem like this, but So, this is another European one. This is actually in Macedonia, so we're back in the middle of Europe, and this is about a man called Vlado Ternetsky, who literally was the man who knew too much. Oh, Tom's right. Tom's interested. Yes, Norfolk. Hang on. I should right. When this case happened, it was a different era, so I didn't. I didn't get that far. So, the small Macedonian town. Again, I apologise to the Macedonians. I'm going to murder this. I think it's Kikavo. Went into shock in the 2000s when a serial killer started operating. As the police searched for him, the population came to rely on the detailed reporting of local journalist Vlado Ternetsky. There was just one problem. He literally knew too much. So, he was born in 1952. Kikevo was at that point in the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. It's now in Macedonia. In the mid-2000s, it had a population of less than 20,000. He had a strict upbringing. His childhood is best described as troubled. He had a poor relationship with his mother, who was a cleaner. As he grew older, he studied journalism and explored both writing and poetry. He met a law student named Vesna when he was 21, and they would marry and have 2 children. In the family, Vesna is the star. She became the first female lawyer in the town. Ternetsky was working for a radio station. He did manage to get his journalism to take off, and he worked for 2 newspapers. He was known to be quiet but passionate about journalism. He threw himself into every article. However, colleagues had very mixed opinions. Passionate, oh yes. Any good, average. He was missing something. He didn't have the spark. Things went badly wrong for Ternetsky in the 2000s. His father committed suicide and his mother accidentally overdosed. The next year he lost his job, so he experienced a deep financial crisis. And in 2004, Vesna achieved a promotion that saw her move 75 miles away to a much, much bigger city. Ternetsky was happy for her to pursue this career, and the couple planned time together. Please bear in mind, in what I'm going to tell you next, that Vesna would later say their marriage had been ideal for all 31 years. Yeah, you might want to revisit that one, Vesna, to be honest. Ternetsky remained in a rural cottage. He was mild-mannered, he was quiet, he was inoffensive. So, Mitra Simajanowska was 64 years old when she vanished on November 16, 2004. There were no signs of a struggle anywhere. A body was found on January 12, 2005, but she'd been dead less than a fortnight. I don't need to tell you that implied she'd been a prisoner somewhere. She'd been tied up, tortured, raped and strangled to death. Her legs were tied with a telephone cord. Remember that. In 2005, 2 men went on trial and were convicted for her murder. They were also convicted of murdering a different man. The killers confessed to torturing and killing. However, they later started to deny this. But Ternetsky found his spark. His coverage of the trial was unmatched. He became a local star. However, a couple of years later, something made these convictions look very unsafe. We now come to the Kikevo monster. So, Lubika Lekoska was 56 when she disappeared in early November 2007. Her body was found amidst rubbish in a ravine in 2008. Again, she'd been killed within a few days of discovery. She'd been kept somewhere alive. She'd been tied up, tortured, raped and strangled to death again and again, tied with telephone cords. But the men who tied people with telephone cords were in prison, weren't they? Then we get to a lady called Zivana. She was 65 when on May 7th, 2008, she became involved in a hoax call about her son being hospitalised and vanished. Her body was found much sooner this time, May 16th. She'd once again been tied up and suffered the same assault and death and was tied with telephone cords. A bottle of aftershave and medical supplies had been stuffed into the body. Each body had been found dumped seemingly at random, naked and wrapped in plastic. Obviously, police realised there was a serial killer here who'd like to hold and somehow torture his victims. They found it unusual that, given that the killer had been so careful in taking and hiding these women, that he would then dump the bodies where they could be easily found. They began to think that the killer wanted the bodies found. He did. As they looked for connection, they realised they were all cleaners. Much later, at the end of this story, they realised that they all had known Tedeschi's mother and looked like her. Now, you are perfectly free to draw whatever conclusion you want about what that means. Why Tedeschi did this. Yes, Tedeschi did this. We'll get to that. So, the police also connected a disappearance to the event. A lady called Gurika was 73 and was a retired cleaner. No body was ever found. There was no sign of any abduction, but this was a small town. There'd been 2 disappearances and murders. This disappearance was, you could assume it was a murder. So the police drew up a psychological profile and looked for all the men who could possibly have done this. 250 were interviewed, including Tedeschi. He was obviously in the large suspect list because he was a fit man who lived in a secluded location alone. But there was nothing really drawing them to him. So, he was a freelance journalist. He needed money. There was a serial killer stalking his hometown. He had roared into action after every murder, selling articles about them. Newspaper editors were so keen on this reborn style and this grasp of detail. Readers appreciated his insight. Columns became the major features of each edition. He once pitched a brilliantly detailed article less than 48 hours after the police had actually found the body. It was the main story in the paper. And it was Tedeschi who first said, "These are all the work of the same serial killer." Wasn't just the public that were interested in what he wrote there. The police were rather interested in what he wrote there, because for some reason Tedeschi was writing about things only the police could possibly have known. Well, the police and the killer. For instance, Tedeschi wrote about the precise type of telephone cord which was used. That had never been released to anybody. I actually have some extracts of Tedeschi's writing. Unlike the earlier references to documents in this stream, I'm actually going to read some of this out. The earlier documents are not things that really are conducive to a positive experience watching this. But I think it's important on this case to give you the vibe of what he was writing in the original Macedonian. No, I've got translations now. Technically, I can sort of speak a bit of French, a bit of Latin, and a bit of English. But even if they'd been in those, I would not attempt a translation. I would not attempt to read them out. I certainly don't know Macedonian. Or I don't even, I'm going to be honest, I don't even know what the language in Macedonia is. Which, saying that, makes it sound like I should have researched that. But because these documents were already translated, for instance, I'm going to read you a quote that was published in The Guardian, which was originally in a Macedonian newspaper. There's another quote in the book, which was published in Esquire, again translated in English. You are not having to rely on my translation skills for this one. So, the people of Kikavo live in fear after another butchered body has been found in the town. The corpse strongly resembles one, discovered 20 kilometres outside Kikavo last year, and there is a possibility that these monstrous murders are the work of a serial killer. Oh, Ditch has pulled it up. Macedonian and Albanian. Thank you, Ditch. Both women were tortured and murdered in the same fashion, which rules out the possibility they could have been done by 2 different people. The awkward serial killer murdered 3 people in 2007, but his victims were all street-based money exchangers, and his motive was to rob them. The motive of the Kikevo monster remains unclear. Both women were friends and living in the same part of town. Police have a few suspects who they are interrogating. The latest body was found in a rubbish dump. It had been tied with a piece of phone cable with which the woman had clearly been previously strangled. Hello Sydney, great to see you. Great stream the other day. Sydney is an amazing streamer because he shows some beautiful real life outdoors things. I was watching you the other day. There was a lake behind you. It was exactly the vibe I needed that afternoon, watching this lovely lake while it rained here. Is it Michigan? I might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think was it Michigan I was looking at? I want to get this right, but I do urge you to have a look. They're a very supportive community, but their real life stuff is good fun. I'll get, if it's not Michigan, I will correct myself. Michigan, yes, brilliant, thank you, excellent. So the police wondered, with good reason, how he knew so much. He had also written about the murder of Lacosa, explaining with utter certainty that she had been approached, told her son had been injured, and then lured into a car. He said 2 men had done this. He said that Tim Koska had been abducted in a car while shopping. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. He was alone in the house. Again, where had he got this from? I mean, was he making this up? Did he know something? He had also been nakedly critical of the police and their failure to solve the crime. He had a great time pointing out the 2 convicted men couldn't have done it. So obviously, this doesn't really stretch on as a mystery, because at this point it's bloody obvious to the police he knows something he shouldn't do. So he was called in and they took a DNA sample. It matched the semen on the victims. He had basically self-confessed in his articles. So they arrested him immediately, charged him with 2 murders, were readying to charge for the 3rd, and were looking for answers about the disappearance. Unfortunately for the police, this case now takes a very different turn. Because that night in prison, Tedeschi killed himself in the cell. He was sharing a cell with 2 other men, but he managed to drown himself in a bucket of water used for ablutions. He'd been put in a shared cell so his cellmates could stop him doing something like this. But he did it while they were asleep. He left a note which allegedly stated, "I am proud of my family and I love them very much. I have not done any of the things I am accused of. I did not commit these murders." So there was shock among the small community, especially amongst its journalists. Ognan, who is a crime reporter at New Macedonia, said, "When the police rang me to say your reporter is the murderer, I could barely believe my ears." So where does this confused end leave everything? Well, the police were happy to conclude that Tedeschi committed all the murders and the disappearance, which was now regarded as a murder. But obviously they had no one to ever charge. They admitted they would never really know. They were never sure of his motive. However, in 2009, reporter Philip Watson spoke to Tedeschi's wife. She remains certain of his innocence. Many locals in the area are also certain of his innocence. They believe he was killed in his cell. Vesna Tedeschi says he was lynched to keep a silence. Now, Ditch says, did they let the original 2 out? So they were convicted of 2 murders. Obviously, they were found innocent of this one. I am not sure offhand what happened with the other murder. Given that they'd been forced into a confession, it's possible that they were let out. Not sure. I did zero in on Tedeschi himself. Now, if you believe, like many of the locals, he was stitched up and murdered, that is an end, which means nobody will ever know what happened. If you believe he did it, and obviously there's quite a lot of evidence he did it. Let's be honest. I'm afraid I have to tell you that there was a second really horrible thing he did. Because it was at this point that the relatives of the victims realised that Tedeschi had visited them many times and questioned them deeply on the lives and the personalities of people he had actually killed. Tim McCloskey's son Zoran said, "He came to our home, we talked, and he asked for details. Who could imagine that it would be our neighbour in the end?" And so, yeah, we don't really know. All a bit strange, but all a bit odd. So we're just going to have a little break there. We've got quite a lot in tonight. How are we feeling, chat? Do we want to... I'm rating that one probably yes. To me, the fact he was reporting on stuff that really he could only have known had he either done it or like known who did it. I mean, there is the possibility that he was in contact with this killer somehow, and that this killer somehow made him take the bullet. But the DNA matched, so I really believe he did it. I think the balance of probabilities he did. But we shall see. Yeah, there's no cat involved in that one. Unfortunately, cat's fault. So how's everyone doing? Are we all in the mood for one more, or have you had enough for this evening? It's been a good stream. I like to. All right. So if you want to become a regular viewer, I'm streaming at 11 p.m. Tuesdays. I'm streaming at midnight Thursdays. We started a bit earlier today because Foxy very kindly offered to raid, and it was great to link up, bring her audience over. Also, as I was in her stream watching her, and it lies 11 p.m. Thursdays. Yeah, all right. I'm sorry if you tuned in at midnight, but it was a good opportunity to link up. I should have announced that. I'm learning. This is my first day on the job. Doing great, just relaxing with some beers. Excellent, Tom. Yes, Tom is not just a great drummer. His vibe is playing drums and drinking beers. He has a beer counter, so every time someone drinks a beer, you can log it in. I think we're up to over 400 so far. Not just Tom, I should add. That's the whole stream. Also, not just in a weekend. He's a veteran of Twitch. But yeah, Tom joined last week, and we've all drunk 500 beers. Did you say Tom will play along to anything? Ditch, you're going to get me in a lot of trouble if you actually act on what I said. Right? So he's great. He is up for any challenge, but I am absolutely not accepting responsibility if you turn up and do it. Right, Tom, I should explain. Ditch is my oldest friend, and I'm sorry for what chaos will ensue. Do you ever regret you say something? Anyway, yeah, we'll do one more. Just let me look something up. I'll choose something good. You're a mischief goblin. Yeah, you're like the treasure goblin. What's the game with the treasure? Is that Diablo with the treasure goblin? Diablo 3, isn't it? 3, yeah. So let's just have a look. What do I hesitate to do this, but is there any? Because I've only got so I've got a lot, but don't try to kill it off. Yeah. Last night somebody made Tom play an absolutely brilliant song, but it was 8 minutes long, and there was a lot of drumming. It's a great song. I've never heard of the band, and I've been listening to them all day. They're brilliant. Diamond Head. It would have been incredibly embarrassing if I then couldn't remember the name of the band. Fortunately, I'm a bit switched on tonight, so that's going well. Okay, I'm going to offer you options. I'm going to do this. So, do you want an unsolved mystery? Do you want a man who is a hero despite committing a load of assaults? You'll see why. To be honest, that might be the slightly more feel-good one. What else could I give you? That's like that I've got already written, ready to go. There's a few of these that I've already tied together for later streams. Do you have a light one to finish on? Yeah. Do I have a light one to finish on? Oh my god. That is a good question. Leave it with me. There is one that I don't know if it's a light one because it's a vigilante one. And you don't want to sit here and go, this is a great. I don't really want to be the guy that sits there and goes, yeah, let's go and beat up these people, because I think that takes things down a different route. But there is a guy that we've got a guy that is regarded as a hero. He's called the Alaskan Avenger, even though he did beat a few people up. So let me tell you why he's called the Alaskan Avenger. I'm sorry if this is not light. I do need. This is a good point, Ditch. I need to find some lighter ones to close these with. That is a very good thing. So, everyone, I promise I will start finding happier sign-off ones. And let's face it, there's a lot you can do. I already know there's a lot you can do. You know, it's not all an hour of egregious killers. It's a very broad subject. There's lots of interesting things that can happen. So we will do, but nonetheless, don't promise you will try. Oh yeah, I will. Is that Yoda? Don't think that's Yoda. Do or do not, there is no try. Don't know. Right. Do or do not, yeah. Alright. We'll do a vigilante that many people online regard as having his heart in the right place. You may decide this is not lighter story you will tell. Yeah. Do or do not lighter story you will tell. So, in 2018, Jason Vukovic was convicted of robbing and badly beating a series of men. But many hailed him as a hero. And he became known as the Alaskan Avenger. Why? Well, Vukovic decided that he would start a vigilante campaign against convicted but very early released sex offenders. So he was sort of a Dexter figure. Now again, somebody might be sat there going, "Did you just say sex offenders? This is not a happy sign-off." Well, he's got a big fan base, so we'll get to this. We will get to the campaign to free him, and we will get to some news. I managed to dig out some real current modern news that I don't think has filtered through to anything else yet, any other books yet. So we'll get to this. So Jason Vukovic, it does not start well for Jason Vukovic. He was born on June 25th, 1975. His mother lived in Anchorage, Alaska. She married a different man to Jason's father. The latter started to beat Vukovic and his brother and abused them. Vukovic would put it this: my parents were dedicated Christians and had us in every church service available 2 or 3 a week. So you can imagine my horror and the confusion I experienced when this man began to use late night prayer sessions to molest me. So in 1989, this stepfather was convicted of abuse. And in 1989, he was only given a 3-year suspended sentence and didn't have to spend any time in prison, and was allowed back into the household, where he resumed what he was doing. Vukovic would later tell the trial, "When I was a little kid, if some tattered up guy would have kicked in the door and beat the guy up, I would have said, 'Yeah, woo, I knew it, thank God,'" which is what he then decides to do as an adult. However, he still has to escape this horrible childhood. And when he was 16, Vukovic and his brother fled. They travelled. They had to steal to survive. They gained criminal records in multiple states. In 2008, he returned to Alaska, where he was charged with theft and drug possession. Now, he was also charged with an assault on his wife. He denies this. He's confessed to the robbery. He denies he ever hurt a woman. Anyway. By 2016, Vukovic remained deeply wounded by his childhood experiences, and he decided that what was needed was a campaign to do exactly what he had wanted when he was younger, a campaign to punish people, because people who had been convicted of these crimes, much like his stepfather, were not spending long times in prison. So, Alaska had a sex offenders register that listed everyone's address. He downloaded it and drew up a list. And he began visiting people. So, Charles Albee had a second-degree conviction for abuse of a minor. He had not served much time in prison. On June 26, 2016, Vukovic went to his home, repeatedly slapped him, told him he was being punished, robbed him and left. Andres Barboza had been convicted of kidnapping of a child and downloading child sexual abuse images. Again, he had not served very long in prison. 2 days after attacking Albee, Vukovic entered his home with 2 women. Now, I need to point out that these 2 women are never mentioned in any of the documentation about this again. I don't know who they are. There's no mention to them, but he took some mates. One filmed it. He took a hammer. He used the hammer to make him sit, and then hit him in the head. He robbed him, and they left with his truck. Yep. I mean, if you're gonna rob someone, you might as well drive off with the truck, I suppose. You know. Meanwhile, Wesley Demarest had a conviction for sexual abuse of a minor. Vukovic broke into his house at 1 a.m, threatened him with a hammer. Demarest did not obey, so he was hit in the head with the hammer. Vukovic asked him. Demarest would later say, Vukovic said, "Do you think you've paid for the crime?" And Demarest said, "Well, yes." And Vukovic said, "No." He called himself. He said, "I'm an avenging angel. I'm going to mete out justice." He then robbed him and left. And this consistent robbery thing, we'll come into this in a minute. So his housemate called the police. Anyway, because the housemate called the police, police attended. Vukovic had not exactly run away. Yes, Dishry said, "Well, we shouldn't condemn vandalism. It's hard to feel sorry for these people." Exactly. It is incredibly hard to feel any sympathy for people that did this, and then a justice system that didn't do anything about it. Anyway, Vukovic was sat sitting in his car. He had all the stolen goods, and he had his list. So the police wanted to charge him with 18 counts, including burglary and assault. He at first said he wasn't guilty, but then he agreed to plead guilty to assault and first-degree robbery for many of the charges being dropped. And he used the court case. In 2018, he was sentenced to 23 years in prison, 5 to be suspended and 5 to be on probation. He appealed his sentence, asking for his PTSD to be considered, but it was rejected. Now, this is why I consider this an interesting discursive case. Before sentencing, Vukovic proposed that his sentence shouldn't be any more than the combined terms of the men he attacked and his stepfather, stating, "Grown men who suffer physical wounds will heal. Children are maligned physically, spiritually, and emotionally." I realise no organised modern society can tolerate vigilantism. However, no reasonable court can think that justice is served when someone who allegedly assaulted 3 convicted child molesters is expected to serve 4 or 5 times as long in prison as they did combined. So, if he had had all of their sentences added together, it would have been 8 years and 9 months. But yeah, he got 23 years. However, he soon came to try and stop other people doing the similar thing. He began to see the fame and the reaction and tried to shoot that in the bud. He said, "I'm far from perfect, a flawed and imperfect individual like everything else." Yes, Ditch says, "I'm inclined to think he had a point there," and I agree. I agree. It does seem very strange, the balance of these court cases, sentences. He said, "It's important to me that someone else born and raised in Alaska and had a similar upbringing doesn't end up with this outcome, because quite candidly, it sucks." He released a statement to the press which went further to try and stop people who were already wanting to do what he had done. To stop them, he said, "I thought back to my experience as a child and felt the overwhelming desire to act. I took matters into my own hands. If you have already lost your youth, like me, please do not throw away your present and your future by committing acts of violence. I now face losing most of the rest of my life to lash out at people." He also said, "There is no place for vigilante justice in an ordered society." However, the general public had a slightly different point of view, and there was a huge show of support. There were multiple online petitions. He was named the Alaskan Adventure. He was named the Alaskan Avenger. The Alaskan Adventure being some sort of holiday thing. Anyway, a petition set up in August 2020 asking Donald Trump to pardon him received 31,645 signatures. That number is still growing. That petition is still there. Meanwhile, you may be wondering, well, you probably aren't wondering, you may be wondering how the victims felt about this. I'm sure you're not. But ironically, Demarest was left with trouble speaking and couldn't work, and is quoted as saying, "It pretty well destroyed my life, so I guess what he wanted." I mean, I don't think there's anybody who's ever felt any sympathy about that. Anyway. Ironically, his attacks and some copycat ones which followed triggered a discussion about whether the Alaska Sex Offenders Register, which was invented to protect civilians, was actually too dangerous to the people on it. Executive Director Joshua Duckett of the Alaska Civil Liberties Union said, "A problem of this list is that it can lead to vigilante behaviour." A counter view came from Keely Olson, Executive Director of Standing Together Against Rape, which is, perhaps people should think about that before they become predators and harm children. Law-abiding citizens have a right to know. So that's a massive debate. We're not going to get quite into that, but I did want to point out that there was actual discussion about that. Anyway, breaking news. So, in 2023, Vukovic was granted parole if he served another 5 years. However, when I wrote this, only a few short weeks ago, there has been a great update. He is being considered. Well, I say it's a great update. If you're him, I'm trying not to put any. I mean, it's a great update. But I've got a scoop. No. He's considered for an electronic tag program. He may be out this year. In the book, and I'll say this on the stream, if you are interested in seeing how he gets on, I mean, you might be. It's the Free Jason Vukovic Facebook page is the home for the campaign. Yeah, so I mean, basically that's about the closest that I've already got prepared to uplifting, which I acknowledge is in no way uplifting, but I'm trying. I will do some uplifting ones. Yeah, sorry. Anyway, yeah. Okay. I'm still feeling good. I'm still feeling strong. But I don't want to take up everyone's evening. It's arguably not as dark. Yes, it is arguably not as dark. There is perhaps something you can get behind in that one, perhaps. I'll be honest. When I've thought about how to pitch this, I'm trying to balance giving people an interesting and enjoyable experience while using material that is inherently dark and in many cases unpleasant. And I'm trying to find the level. So bear with me as I find the level. We shall see how we get on. So I want to thank you. It's thought provoking. It's interesting. So I want to discuss a few things I may do on the stream and get some comments on them. So far everything I need to look at puppies. Right. Well, firstly, we're going to raid out this time. If anybody has a raid suggestion, I want you to tell me. If not, why is that not working? I have a well, that's frozen. I have a suggestion. I think they're live. I want to look them up, but hang on, I'm going to have to use this screen. Why's that not working? Oh, I guess it's because I'm streaming. Hang on, give me a second, chaps. Oh, that's not. I have to do it on here. Okay. My Chrome has frozen. This is going to make looking this up slightly trickier. Luckily, I have loads of browsers because Steve saw the number of browsers and tabs I have opened earlier, and I have to admit, I think he saw what an absolute. What's that? Dishboy has this thing. You're a grasshopper. No, we've not got. I don't think we've got a raid call yet. The idea is you'll see why we've not got a raid call if what I'm going to raid is on. I'm not making any promises that they are actually on at this time of night. Let me look this up and then I will explain. It will all become clear. So if I'm right, how have they turned this off? Yeah, no, right. I know exactly what we're going to raid, right? When I am depressed and I need a pick-me-up, and none of my favourite streamers are on Twitch, I go to the Twitch channel that is the absolutely perfect ending to pick us all up. It is called Adorable Kittens. It is 24-hour footage of kittens. I think Bob Ross is at the weekend, which we'll have to do. But it's kittens. We will go and raid kittens. That's all. That's the promise. We will go and see kittens. This will cheer us all up. Unless you don't like kittens, in which case, I'm sorry. But this is what I wanted to do. This is why I don't. I appreciate the raid call, Sydney. I don't think it's monitored that well because it's just a 24-hour kitten stream. We will get that sorted, I promise, Sydney. But when you mentioned it the other day, I was like, right, I know exactly what we're going to do. We'll just go and we'll test it out and we'll go and try some kittens. So things I want to do on the stream. So far, I've done all me talking. I like that. I do this because I like the storytelling aspect. I like sitting here talking, telling stories and interacting with you. However, I realise that might not be the most fun thing every time, and and this is a modern media system, so there are other ways to do this. Things to do on the stream. Yes, I forgot the camera lens. Steve was very kindly helping me for a long period of time, and then I had to fit in between that and this stream a big chunk of work. So I will get on the camera lens. We focused on lights and getting the camera. So I think Ditch, you will have to admit that the visuals are looking a lot better. But yeah, so I may do. There is a lot of police interview footage online. And now the idea is not to sit here and just play a documentary or play a police interview. But I think if I can research the crime and find beforehand the key points to drop information in, it may be interesting. You need a lighter number. Yeah, I'll work on that. It may be interesting to do a police interview stream. And look at how some of that progresses. If that's something that appeals, do say in chat or in Discord. If you want Discord, you can do exclamation S for all my socials. Discord allows you to tell me anything you want about suggested crimes or what you'd like me to cover, or comments on what's going on. It will also let me tell you when the streams are happening. Apart from today, when I should have mentioned it was going to be earlier. Look, you can't get everything right at one go. So I may do that. I'm very reluctant to just play a documentary. That's not what I want to do. I would rather research and tell that story myself. I've seen other people do that. We probably won't do that, but I think police camera footage. You're doing great, thank you. Yeah, so that's my idea. If any of that appeals, we could do that. Obviously, there are copyright things about that would not go on YouTube, but I think as a stream, it could be a very interesting stream. And there is a lot to be said about how police interview people. Yeah, if your courage is not transformed into a documentary, exactly. I will absolutely not be playing a documentary that I cannot add substantial value to. It's all about adding value. I think I can add value to like a police interview. And I think it would support my talking. I don't think those other things would. So that's the plan. There may be a few of those going forward. Obviously not more of me talking. You will never find me gaming. No hot tub. Well, I mean, you say that. I think that ought to be down to a vote. I wouldn't want to sort of rule out that there'd be a demand for that. But I have a feeling that would end things permanently. So we won't bother with that. Yeah, Sydney's just put up the follow account. It hasn't fallen, because Ditches mentioned hot tubs, but that I have a feeling it could do. Yeah. So we'll see. Yeah, I'm not going to game because I'm going to keep this purely focused. What we will definitely do on Halloween and other events is spooky mysteries. We're definitely going to do spooky mysteries. In fact, on Halloween we may just do outright ghost stories. Certain games might make sense. Actually, that's true. I was very kind. I think a chap called Wolfie was in the stream last time, and he told me about a detective game. Now, I do play a lot of detective games. I have a professional and a personal interest in how all sorts of detective gaming works. Now, if there is any interest in me discussing those, I could do that. I don't know if I wouldn't play them, but I could talk you through things. Because it just so happens I have a dual interest. Disco Elysium. I'd love to play Disco Elysium, but again, it's time. I've been told it has one of the absolute best decision trees ever made. I would love to find that out. So we'll see. We'll see what comes up. Not that there's anything wrong with playing games, but I just want to keep focus. War of the Worlds, your style. Yeah. I just want to keep focused. But I do want to explore. I mean, from where I'm coming from, I spent years writing, and now I've moved into this visual media where I can reach out to people. So I'm trying to sort of mentally explore what can you do on a visual medium, and with that sort of interaction. So we shall see. Yeah. Well then, everybody, I think I have kept you enough. We have done 2 hours 46. Cat cam is hard in writing. Yeah. The cat cam plan is until I'm established, I won't risk Polly turning me off halfway through, because I feel like that's going to give people a bad impression, isn't it? I mean, you can't build an audience when you vanish halfway through because a cat's just nuked you. And I love her, but she presses everything. So, but we will get cat cam. Cat cam. There is a cat bed sat here. We shall see what happens in the future. That is a promise. But again, I can't. She sometimes, she doesn't always come in, so I can't have a cat night to introduce her because we all know what will happen. Yeah, she won't be here. Yeah. All right, everyone. That's been. I've enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed that. So, obviously, I've got to do the proper ending. If you have any interest in reading about true crime, I have a true crime series on. Oh, thank you, sir. I have a true crime series that's published on Amazon, True Crime Dossiers. The omnibus of the first 3 volumes has just come out. That is all 3 volumes, essentially for the price of 2 in a larger format. That came out. That went live today. Oh, thanks very much, Ditch. So, if you've got any interest in that. If you've got any interest in watching these streams, please do feel free to drop in my Discord. And yeah. Right. Oh, we've got to do the raid. Right. Bear with me. We are raiding kittens. Let me see if this works. If this doesn't work, you will not let me forget this, will you? Charlie. This may be a problem because my Chrome has frozen. So my stream manager is not working. Am I the only one that... So, right, forgive everyone that's watching, forgive me, we're just going to have some boring technical chatter. Am I the only one who can do a raid? Or can any of the mods do it? If I sent you the link. And then I'll work out why my Chrome has ceased working. Depends on mod privileges. Okay. Actually, I can refer... Right. Mods can. Thanks, Steve. Steve, are you able to... If I sent you the link in Discord, are you able to set up a raid? Because my... I'm sure... not to bore you and repeat this again. My stream manager is frozen, so I can't actually do anything. Don't say it's because I've got too many tabs. Yeah, again, that's because I can't... No, I can't even... maybe this chat will work. Let's see if... Right. I've got this. Yes, I have a second chat. Yeah, working on it, chaps. Bear with me. Trust me, the kittens are worth it if I can pull this off. And then we'll have to work out what's gone wrong with Chrome. Right! Get yourself ready for adorable kittens. And trust me, they are adorable. Right, thanks everybody. Have a great time. Enjoy kittens. I will see you over there.